Chapter 75 to 81. 80s. Egypt. In the middle of the quiet night, well, not so quiet. Two muscular and outlandishly dressed men fought jumping, and almost flying, through the rooftops of the city. One of them throwing strange green projectiles to the other, and the other dodged and deflected them with his bare hands, which hit against nearby structures, destroying them by the impact. "This is Kaiosh's Hierophant," said the blonde, muscular man who tried to avoid the ranged attacks directed at him. But every time he dodged an attack he would bump into something that looked like threads, and every time he touched one of those new threads, new projectiles would shoot out at him. Until he realized that he was surrounded by those threads. "This is a kekai that will fire if you touch it," Kaioshin shouted from the top of a belfry. "What?" the muscular blonde shouted from a dome. "It has spread itself around you in the radius of 20 m. It can detect anything that you or the world does. Take this, go." The 20 m emerald splash. Kaioshin screamed, throwing a lot of his projectiles at Dio from all directions, making it impossible for him to block them or dodge them all at the same time as he had done previously. But while a muscular old man arrived to witness what seemed the final play that would end the life of the evil Dio. "Idiot. I will show you the power of the world, the power that rules the world. Zie Warudo," he shouted, posing at the same time that the golden and muscular stand the world manifested behind Dio, activating his skill, stopping the time completely. And in that time-stop state, Dio advanced calmly without much hurry towards the unprotected Kaioshin, destroying in his way all the threads of Hierophant, the stand of Kaioshin that was around him. "This is the power of the world. But since time has stopped, you can't see or touch me. Die, Kaioshin." Dio screamed a few meters from Kaioshin while his stand hit him in the chest with all his strength, piercing it with a single punch. After mortally wounding him, Dio made the world to draw his fist from Kaioshin's body, and still in time stopped, calmly spoke to himself. "You do not even know you're dead. And you're next," he said, looking at the old man who was in the building near to him. Moments later, time resumed again, and all the destruction and changes made by Dio during the time stop took place at the same time, like the destruction of Hierophant's threads, the rocks suspended in the air that flew in an impossible trajectory, and of course, Kaioshin, with a fist-sized hole in his chest, shot out into the air towards a water silo on the roof of a nearby building. All that happened in a single instant, before the astonished gaze of the old man who saw that all this happened in a single moment. What happened? He just flew by all of a sudden. "Kaioshin," the old man with cold sweat shouted as he saw his friend seriously injured in a very bizarre situation. "Joseph. It's your turn. I think that for Jonathan's body, the best blood to assimilate it would be Joestar blood. Right?" Dio said with arrogance, showing the scar of his neck, the union between his evil head and the noble body of Jonathan Joestar. "Go!" Joseph shouted when he saw the bastard of Dio, the same son of a bitch that always appeared in the photos he took with his stand. But while this almost intergenerational confrontation Joestar was taking place, the poor Kaioshin, embedded in the water silo and near his death, tried to understand what had happened. He was aware about everything that happened in his field of threads, and realized that all the threads that were destroyed were cut individually and separately, but at the same time. And this, together with other coincidental coincidences, discovered the secret of the power of Dio's stand. "Stop the time. I have to tell everyone this. I have to try, no matter how. I have to tell Mr. Joestar. Or we are all going to lose. I'll predict this. You are going to get your blood sucked dry." Dio shouted, flying towards Joseph with murderous and hungry intentions, the typical ones that a vampire would have. But back then, boom! The handles of the giant clock that was next to Dio and Joseph were destroyed by a projectile. He was Kaioshin, who fired that attack with the last energies he had left, before dying, the last emerald splash. Emerald splash. He missed by a mile. He probably lost control of his stand as he died. "HM. Dio said, observing that last-minute surprise without giving much importance. But Joseph understood Kaioshin's intentions. He would never make a mistake like that at that moment. He was trying to tell him something by attacking the clock. But right now, he did not have time to think about it or mourn his friend's death. He had to keep away. Hermit purple. From the hand of Joseph, his stand, some purple brambles appeared and tied Dio, who was still flying in the air with his restricted movements. "Take this. The power of the sun. Hammon! Joseph shouted, channeling the Hammon into his hermit purple, Hammon the energy that could easily destroy vampires like Dio. But before the Hammon of Joseph could travel in his hermit purple to his goal. Old man. Your stand is the worst. Dio shouted as he quite easily destroyed hermit purple from our old Joestar, despite the fact that according to JoJo Wiki hermit purple's durability is A, the highest score. Does not make any sense. And with those seconds of advantage that Joseph won, the persecution began once again while he tried to decipher Kakiyoin's message. Although without anyone noticing. Kakiyoin's body had disappeared from the silo where he died. Is that Dio's secret? The ability to stop time. I've got it, Kakiyoin. Forgot the message you gave up your life for. Joseph shouted, curiously without Dio listening, while he was surprised and frightened by the terrifying and almost invincible ability of Dio's stand during the chase. Until. HM. He's gone, shouted Mr. Joestar upon realize at some moment during the persecution Dio had disappeared, but actually he was right behind his back with the world ready to give him the final blow, but, before hitting the defenseless old man. The world was forcibly stopped for some reason. And for some reason. Joseph did not seem at all relieved. W. What's wrong? You're not attacking. Don't you want my blood, Dio? Mr. Joestar said in a way between surprise and provocation. But Dio, like a cruel, experienced and calculating villain, was not fooled like others Aztec vampires bodybuilders a few decades ago. Decadas, you are using your Hammon to protect you. You wrapped yourself with hermit purple and Hammon. You are smart. I can't underestimate you. I could say the same about you. You saw throughout my plan and didn't attack me. Very cautious, Joseph said, quite frustrated and with cold sweat showing the hermit purple with Hammon that he had under his clothes. Proving that Dio was right, if he had attacked him, he could have been seriously injured because of the Hammon. And since his mortal enemy had disrupted his ingenious plan, he had to counterattack, verbally. However, I know the weakness of your stand. There's a limit to the amount of time you can stop, right? About 3 to 4 seconds. If you could stop it longer we would have been killed in the mansion. You wouldn't have to come after us like this, said Mr. Joestar, explaining the power and weakness of Dio, either to provoke him, to verify if he was right by his overexpression, or to explain it to the spectator who had not yet noticed. So now you know my sand power. You are good, he said, something impressed. The one who got it was Kakiyoin. I'm not going to waste his death. Joseph said with determination before the mortal enemy of his family. But even though Dio was impressed by Joseph for having discovered the secret of his stand so quickly, he did not despair, he did not bother. So what? What does it matter if you know? What can you do? Dio said with confidence and arrogance. He believed that his power was absolute despite the small limitations it had. Hermit Purple and Hammon. Joseph attacked with his most effective attack against vampires, announcing his attack as in almost any other shonen manga or anime. You are really persistent. However, I don't have to touch you, Hammon, to attack you. Dio said as the world destroyed the roof where Joseph was standing, causing him to fall from the building. The old Mr. Joestar tried to use Hermit Purple to attach himself to a Valken and thus make the fall less deadly than it would be, but... Hey! What has happened? Joseph said as he fell to the ground, quite surprised. Despite having been able to hold on to that balcony in the last second, the impact of the fall should have been quite dangerous for any human's body, regardless of whether he was an expert Hammon master or not. He should have wounds and possibly some broken bone, however he did not have any injuries. It was as if something had stopped his fall. But that was not the time to be surprised by that, since Dio was coming flying towards him to suck all his blood. And while the idiots of a nearby restaurant laughed at Joseph's fall, instead of helping him to stand up, as it should be done with any old man who falls to the ground. Then Joseph found Jotaro, his grandson, who had run to his help upon see that Dio was chasing him. Jotaro! Get away! Don't come any closer! And at that moment both Jotaro and the poor cat in the street noticed the presence of Dio, who was few meters behind Joseph. Jotaro! Good! But he's a bit out of my range at the moment. I'll deal with Joseph first, said Dio, falling from the sky. The secret behind his stand is time. His stand is able to stop time. Joseph said, trying to pass the message to his grandson, in case it was too late for him, but... Zie Warudo. Time stopped once more. And in that space of time stopped, Dio spoke again for himself instead of doing something useful. At first I was only able to stop time for 1 second. As the scar on my neck healed, I could stop it for 2 seconds, 3 at most. And as he moved peacefully towards Joseph, hitting anyone on the road, including the poor cat which he dismembered and scattered his viscera in the food of the restaurant people, he continued with his speech, now I can stop it for 5 seconds. It's odd that you can still count time after it has stopped, but it's about 5 seconds. Sooner or later I'll be able to stop it for 1 minute, then minutes, 1 hour, then possibly indefinitely. I am awaiting that day very much. And after checking that Joseph had covered his body with Hammond again, Dio chose to use another method to kill him without touching him directly. Dio pulled a knife from his jacket. The Hammond which gave me trouble 100 years ago is useless in front of the world, and preparing to throw his knife, scream repeatedly, "Muda muda 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 muda." But hey, what happened? Dio said, very alert and even terrified to see that the knife in his hand had mysteriously disappeared. And when he turned around in search of an explanation, he saw something very disconcerting. In his space of time stopped, a strange person of whom he had no knowledge, held the knife that until few tenths of a second was in his hand. A strange tall, muscled person, like almost everyone in this part of the manga, with red hair, a third eye on his forehead and a red monkey tail dancing in the air. That man was sitting quietly eating in the restaurant where Dio had hit everything around him, a strange humanoid stone statue on his feet, with Dio knife in one hand and the arrow that created stand users orbiting around him. Is it that one cannot eat quietly in a restaurant in Egypt without an evil vampire stopping the time and start boasting of his power while trying to kill a poor old man by throwing a knife, shouting "Muda" as a retard? Said Broly, pretending to be aggrieved by the situation, pushing the plate of food away from his table. "Nani ai?" Dio shouted, his brain overheated due to so many terribly unexpected things happening at the last moment. Is it that one cannot eat quietly in a restaurant in Egypt without an evil vampire stopping the time and start boasting of his power while trying to kill a poor old man by throwing a knife, shouting "Muda" as a retard? Said Broly, pretending to be aggrieved by the situation, pushing the plate of food away from his table. "Nani ai?" Dio shouted with a totally distorted face, his brain overheated due to so many terribly unexpected things happening at the last moment. Despite this extremely unexpected and unthinkable event, Dio returned to notice this strange individual and stepped back. Impossible. Who is this guy? How is he able to talk and move in a stop time? This strange appearance. Is he a human? Is he a stand user? But due to the appearance of Broly, Dio did not realize that 5 seconds had passed and that the effect of the world was about to end without having been able to kill a single Joestar. Time resumed again. But everything that Dio had done during the time stopped had been cancelled. All the destruction he had created to reach Joseph had disappeared. "You, who the hell are you? A stand user? And what are you trying to do?" Dio yelled, quite nervous and on alert. For a long time he had planned his long-awaited revenge against the Joestar family, and until now he thought he had calculated all the variables to carry out his Geet plan, but the appearance this person was not in his parameters. In addition, he had a stand user creator arrow that the old woman had, which flew in the air without apparently being held by a stand. And that strange statue by his side was also something very mysterious and macabre, something that reminded him of the stone mask that changed his destiny. Something was evident. This guy is plotting something, and very possibly against me. And he's not normal at all. At the same time, time returned to its normal progression and Joseph and Jotaro continued their conversation. "Jotaro, you have to get away from," Joseph said, but stopped short when he saw his grandson's puzzled expression, probably because of what was happening behind his back, and hearing Dio's alert voice asking something to someone, confirmed his suspicions even before turning to see what was happening. "You thought I was a stand user, but it was me, Broly," said Broly, the mysterious person pointing at himself with his thumb and face of evil. Either because of how tense that situation was, the contrast that phrase had created in that mysterious person, or because they had not understood the joke, there was silence between the four. "Ha ha 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 ha. Come on man, do not keep looking at me like that, this is one of your mythical phrases," said Broly to Dio, whose face was totally distorted by all these bizarre events. He did not understand anything that was happening. But when Joseph turned and looked in the direction of the strange person from whom Dio seemed to be frightened, "Oh my god." Joseph shouted, putting his hands on his face as he always did when he knew something was disturbing, although he had never shouted so much for that. Something that made Jotaro more alert. By the reaction of his grandfather it was possible that this person was an enemy, and at the same time Dio relaxed a bit, since there was the possibility that this strange subject was also an enemy of the Joestar. I guess I must not be the only supernatural being who has antagonized the Joestar in these last 100 years. Grandpa, do you know who this guy is? Jotaro asked Joseph, who seemed catatonic from what he saw. Jose pointed his finger in Broly's direction and said, "No, I do not know anything about him, but, that stone statue. I do not know why he's in that state or why it's here. But I would never forget that appearance no matter where I'm. It's Kars. The evil Aztec god that created the stone that transformed Dio into a vampire, the one I defeated by sending him to space in my youth days." Naniai. Joseph's words made Jotaro and Dio startle, especially Dio, whose life was closely linked to the stone mask that transforms humans into vampires. "Oh, you mean this?" said Broly, pointing to the statue of Kars beside his feet. "Yes, I found Kars, who has become a kind of stone by freezing, floating in space near Mars while I was taking a little walk." "Hahaha, you had a lot of luck with that volcano, Joseph. Until that time I never thought of that method to send someone out of the Earth's atmosphere to defeat him. You are definitely my favorite Joestar." Once again Broly's words shocked the three Joestar. Dio has Jonathan's body, so he's half Joestar right now. Joseph was terrified to see that he really had in front of him that immortal and invincible being who won by luck, and also felt praised for being reminded of his feat, but above all overwhelmed by what lay behind the statements of Broly. Jotaro was quite surprised by his grandfather's past feat, since he practically saw him as a clown with certain moments of greatness, and he also understood what was behind the words of Broly. He had found Kars in space, near Mars, and that means an alien? Absurd. However, his appearance and the expression of my grandfather. And as for Dio, he was sweating and biting his lip trying to clarify his ideas. Creator of the stone mask? Volcano? Outer space? Favorite Joestar? But before Dio could do or say something, something happened. Crack. 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 "Oh. No." Joseph shouted, because what he feared most when he saw the statue that Kars had become had come reality. A3A3 https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=xuhv. Juju. Kars' perfect being had been reborn and was very furious. Oh no. On the one hand is Dio, Kars on the other, and if it was not enough I also have an alien that seems he likes me, and that possibly wants to kidnap me and probe me. I just need Suzy Q to find out about my infidelity and this will be the worst of my nightmares. That was obviously what Yaspe thought, while Jotaro and Dio were put on alert displaying their two stands. That Kars looked like someone extremely dangerous, especially if someone had to resort to throwing him into space to get rid of him. Jojo. Damn wretch. How dare you do that to me? I'm going to make you pay for everything I've suffered these years. I'm going to cut you to pieces. And this time there is no volcano that can help you. Kars yelled, taking out his two bone saw swords and transforming the lower part of his body into that of a velociraptor to have even more speed. But Kars, not knowing how or why, he was paralyzed in the air, unable to move even a muscle. What is happening to me? Kars thought, fearing the possibility of being immobilized again for decades. Telekinesis. Is that the ability of your stand? Thought the others. No one is going to hurt my favorite JoJo, besides, here the protagonist is me. For now get into my dimension, said Broly, arriving at a speed imperceptible to the human eye, hitting the stomach of Kars, and in a matter of seconds from the point where he was hit, Kars began to disappear little by little for what seemed a green energy. And once again there was disruption among the audience, that Broly was really powerful and dangerous. Telekinesis, teleportation, transporting another to another dimension, traveling through space. Does your stand with no form allow you to manipulate the 3 dimensions at your convenience with unlimited range and possibilities by chance? No, 3 no, there must be 4, since somehow you could also move during the time stopped, Dio said, using the hyper-deduction. Jojo, covered in cold sweat, evidently he is the one who most needed to know what is Broly's ability, since everything Broly had said he seemed to be in favor of the Joestar family. If that's his ability, it's terrifying. I cannot believe it. I cannot accept it. How can there be a stand superior to my Zie Warudo? Well, it is true that I can manipulate dimensions as you said. I am surprised by the deductive capacity of the JoJo-verse people. Sometimes you make a fool of Conan Idagawa. However, I'm not able to do this for my stand. In fact, I'm not even a stand user, yet. Broly said, looking at the arrow he had flying around him. And ignoring some strange comments, the JoJos talked again among themselves. He is not a stand user. That could explain why we are not able to detect it. But, that means... Jotaro said without flinching too much, it's Bada's no matter the time or situation. Oh my god. So he's really an alien with strange powers like those of the Shonen Jump? Joseph shouted as only he knew how to do. Exactly, I think no one in this world would have said it better, Joseph, Broly said with a smile, since he had hit right away. He was extraterrestrial, had powers and specifically an extraterrestrial with powers of the Shonen Jump. But before they could continue with the conversation. Zie Warudo. Dio stopped the time and without losing a tenth of a second, unlike he always does when stopping time. He launched at full speed to attack his enemy with the world. I do not know if it's an alien or not. But his power is real. If he can teleport himself, escape will not help much, more when he is allied with the Joestar. However, I do not notice Hugh's stand anywhere, and if he really is not a stand user, it means that I still have a chance to kill him. Only a stand user can see a stand and beat him. In time stopped Jotaro and Joseph cannot assist him. It's now or never. I have to beat them to death with the world before he can use any skill. Die. Dio yelled 2 meters from Broly, throwing all the knives that were kept in his jacket against him. However, that was only a distraction. The one that should give the coup de grace was the world, which was already in range. Emude. Emude. Mud. Ah. While the world was hitting Broly without him being unmoved. Dio's arms and legs were ripped from his body and pulverized as if they had been compressed by a hydraulic compressor. The fact that I cannot see your stand does not mean that with your insignificant building level strength you can do something to me, and of course I do not need to attack your stand to defeat you too easily, said Broly, flying through the air mocking Dio, who was trying to regenerate his limbs amputated on the floor screaming like a pig. And time returned to normal. Ah. And Dio, crippled on the floor still shouting before the stunned face of Joseph, who did not know what had just happened, but then. Do not worry Grandpa, it seems that everything will be solved soon. Also, try to be kind to that alien, said Jotaro, who could see what happened during the time stopped. His star platinum was starting to awaken his true power, the same power Dio has. Jotaro, you mean? Mr. Joestar said incredulously and cheerfully. Yes, Joseph, you should be the one to kill that scum, but I'm afraid this is my reward for everything I'm going to do by you. Do not worry, I've cured your daughter and is in the company of her mother in Japan, then we'll talk about the rest. Say goodbye to this world, Dio. Or should I call you Jodio? Jonathan plus Dio equals Jodio equals fucked, in Andalusian Spanish. Ha 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 ha. Said Broly, laughing at his own joke and doing the same thing he did with Cars seconds before, kidnapping Dio in his formless realm in a very slow and agonizing way. Wah. Ya wa wa ya. This is impossible. I am. Ah. Dio yelled in despair before his mortal enemies and Broly before disappearing completely. And after a few seconds of silence where Joseph and Jotaro tried to get used to the idea that their crusade around the world had ended in this strange and unexpected way. So it's over. Has Dio been defeated once and for all and my daughter is safe? Joseph said with incredulity and joy, and some disappointment, since he hoped that after all the suffering, pain and sacrifices they had experienced, that it was they who put an end to Dio and not this strange extraterrestrial which appeared out of nowhere and solved everything as if he were a narrative resource deus ex machina. Yes, that bastard will no longer be a problem for the world. Although, I still have some things to do before I leave. And one of them is to have a nice talk with your grandson, said Broly crunching his knuckles in a somewhat threatening way. Although, I still have some things to do before I leave. And one of them is to have a nice talk with your grandson, said Broly crunching his knuckles in a somewhat threatening way. The situation got tense once again for both JoJo. Broly may not be an unconditional ally after all. What do you mean? Do you have a problem with me? Jotaro said with his usual tough guy attitude, even though he knew there weren't too many opportunities to beat Broly if he is his enemy. No. You are the problem and you will have problems, you and many people around you if you continue with that shitty attitude all your life. Your mother spoiled you too much, so you've become a spoiled teenager with rebellious attitude. So it will be Uncle Broly who will discipline you a bit. But if it doesn't bother you, we'll change places, they've been watching at us like we were weirdos for a long time, Broly said, snapping his fingers. With the snap in an instant the landscape of the streets of Cairo changed completely. They were no longer in Egypt, but in a place that the two Jajas knew very well, especially Jotaro, although it was completely unknown to Polnareff, who had been hiding in case he had to intervene at some point, which had also been teleported to another place. Where the hell are we now? Polnareff said, very surprised and confused as Joseph and Jotaro looked around stupefied. It was too shocking to be true. Papa. Jotaro. Said an energetic middle-aged woman running towards our JoJos. Honey. Jotaro. Said an energetic woman of advanced age who was running towards our JoJos too. They were Holly and Suzy Q respectively, the mother and grandmother of Jotaro. When they saw them they had no doubt, they were in the house of Jotaro in Japan, where the adventure of Stardust Crusades began. They had been teleported from Egypt to Japan in a single instant due to Broly's snapping. If before they had any doubt about Broly's abilities, now they no longer had any, especially seeing that Holly was fine, which should have been an endearing reunion, but... Shut up. Annoying bitch. Jotaro shouted as only he knew how to do, causing both to slow down. Hee, Holly said, not bothering too much about his son's attitude. Jotaro. How dare you talk like that to your mother? Joseph shouted, seconded by Polnareff, who was a gentleman with the ladies. See, this is what I meant. With this shit attitude, especially with women, especially women in your family, such as your possible future woman or your possible future daughter, you will only harm them and you too. Your mother was too permissive with you, your father unfortunately can't be with you and your grandfather was out of the country, so it will be Uncle Broly who will discipline you, youth, said Broly as if he were a film teacher trying to rehabilitate a hard conflicting boy. Damn, are you mocking me? Jotaro said, as charming and nice as ever. Jotaro. Said Holly, Jotaro's mother, worried that her cute son may receive some damage. Don't worry, ma'am. All this I do for the sake of Jotaro. Despite his appearance and manner of acting, he is still young and his attitude can be improved with a little help, but if he continues like this he will have many problems in the future. I'm a professional in this, I learned a lot from the Dog Whisperer program. I know all the necessary tricks, said Broly speaking to Holly, one of the most faint-hearted mothers of the anime. But... Holly said, trying to defend the indefensible attitude of his son, when suddenly... Joseph touched her back with his German robotic hand. Holly honey. That man with 3 eyes is right. Something must be done soon, or maybe too late in the future. Think about your son's happiness. Said Joseph, who didn't think it was a bad idea to discipline his conceited grandson a bit. I totally agree. During the trip you've behaved like shit with any mademoiselle we've met. And I can't believe that you behaved like that with your precious and benevolent mother too, said Polnareff, who was also irritated by Jotaro's attitude towards women, and also wanted to earn points with Jotaro's mother. Grandpa. Polnareff. Damn traitors. Jotaro said, very angry and disappointed with his grandfather and international friend. Well. Jotaro. Are you ready to reflect on what you have done wrong? Broly said with a big smile. He always found annoying the overly badass and rowdy attitude of Jotaro. He knew that this would lead to his divorce and enmity with his daughter Jolin until the events of Stone Ocean, so he wanted to help that not happen. He liked the end of the game JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Eyes of Heaven, and would like something similar to happen in the part 4. Damn alien. You are pissing me off. Jotaro said, revealing his star Platinum ready to attack. He knew he didn't have many chances or maybe any to defeat him, but it wasn't his style to receive without giving. Aura. 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 Jotaro said, attacking with Star Platinum, giving an endless punch sequence. Oh, you start attacking, and without warning, that lack of manners, anyway. Emude. 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 Broly yelled, attacking with his bare hands. But he wasn't punching, they were educational slaps. And after several educational thumps, healing magic, some self-help phrases and a lot of hypnosis, a new, nicer Jotaro was born. Mother, I'm so glad you're okay. Sorry for how I've behaved with you in recent years, Jotaro said, hugging his mother with sweetness and apologizing, something he hadn't done for years. Oh. My Jotaro is again the sweet child that was before. Holy said, hugging tightly the tall and muscular Jotaro, wishing that this wasn't a dream she could wake up from. Oh nice. My grandson is no longer a delinquent without a sense of humor, said Joseph, joining the hug. Great. Now I can have a partner for double dates that doesn't scare away the girls when he talk. Polnareff said, embracing her as well. But. Aura. Aura. Star Platinum hit Joseph and Polnareff, sending them to the ground several meters. Fuck that pain. Weren't you supposed to have made Jotaro more sociable and friendlier? Joseph asked, sore and confused, touching his head, where his deformed hat was due to the almost merciless punch of his grandson's stand. Ha 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 ha. You always make me laugh. My therapy only included a better attitude with women, so it would be better if you don't make him angry or you will be punched. Come on, don't look at me like that, I like you very much, and I want this to be a truly happy ending. Broly said, snapping his fingers once again, snapped that he put on the lookout our JoJos and Polnareff, who remembered what happened the last time Broly did the same. Guau guau guau. At that moment they were all silent and moved, but above all Polnareff, whose tears kept falling from his eyes because of what he was seeing, for whom was running at full speed towards him. Iggy. Polnareff shouted with emotion while Iggy, the most beloved dog of this series, which died by the attack of Vanilla Ice, jumped on him and began to chew his hair with more delicacy than ever, although the good of Jean-Pierre Polnareff didn't care for that. But Iggy wasn't the only one to return among the dead. We're not supposed to be in Dio's mansion. What do we do again at Jotaro's house? Said Avdol, who thought he had received a surprise attack in Dio's mansion, but he didn't remember much after that. My wounds are healed and... Iggy? Avdol? Polnareff? Joseph? Jotaro? Jotaro hugging his mother. I see, you can't decipher my message and that's why now you're all dead with me. Is this heaven or hell? Kaioshin said that he was having rather hasty conclusions, although from his point of view it was most likely. Kaioshin, Avdol, IG. Jotaro said, shocked when he saw his deceased friends alive, but after a few seconds of confusion he went to explain to them what had happened in a badass way. Meanwhile Joseph was about to cry like Polnareff, who had also jumped to hug Avdol and Kaioshin in tears. He was trying to know exactly what Broly had done, Broly as you have. But before I could finish the question, while I was trying to adapt to your dimension I asked a magical dragon friend of mine to give me the power to resurrect whatever I wanted whenever. And here you have it. I wanted this to be a happy ending for all of you. And suddenly while our heroes were still celebrating, some of them bathed in tears, that they were still alive and that they had fulfilled their mission. Brother, where am I? Who are these people? Said a young woman who suddenly appeared behind our Stardust Crusaders. At that moment, to hear that voice coming from his back, the heart of Jean-Pierre Polnareff froze, and with fear and expectation turned his head back with his eyes red for how much he had cried, and when he saw that there was behind Sherry, he could hardly articulate a word. He was seeing his little sister Sherry Polnareff, who was murdered Guile, the reason he started his trip, to avenge her. It cannot be, it cannot. How? No. It cannot be true, Polnareff yelled with fear, but without losing hope, since he remembered the occasion when the Stand Judgment created a murderous golem of Sherry when he asked him to revive her. It's no dream, hallucination or scam, it's really your sister Sherry, to whom I've revived as well as your friends, of course with no memory of the reason for her death. Don't be afraid, Polnareff, it's real, it's alive, with you, said Broly, touched by fulfilling the greatest wish of one of his favorite JoJo characters. Hearing Broly's words and once again observing his confused sister, Polnareff burst into tears once more as he held her tightly, as if he was afraid that she might leave his side again. Sherry. Sherry. Bua-ha-ha-ha-ha. Thank you. Thank you. Bua-pa. Sherry. Buh. Cried uncontrollably Polnareff. He cried so much and so fast that he was almost drowning with his own tears, trembling uncontrollably until he couldn't even talk. While the others, especially Adval and Joseph, tried to contain their tears as well. Well, I guess I've done my job here. I think a stranger like me is going to spoil this reunion, said Broly, who turned to leave. But before he could leave, Joseph went to say something to him. Broly, don't go. I don't know how to thank you, but thank you with all my heart. I tell you in everyone's name, Joseph said, bowing in respect and thanks. You don't need to thank me, I have not done it for you, I've done it for me. Helping you has made me feel good about myself. You could say that I have only increased my ego in a self-satisfied way by doing a good action in principle disinterested by others, just as when a millionaire donates 4 spare coins to an apparent beneficial cause. But suddenly a female voice made its entrance. But is not that self-indulgent selfishness the empathy that has made humans come to this point? Putting yourself in the shoes of others, making you feel the pain of another as your own so that you can try to help him as if it were your pain. Feel the pain mutually, help each other and rejoice each other when that pain has been overcome. Is not that selfishness that you describe the main driver of the human development and association? Is not that what made this adventure possible? Said Suzy Q, Joseph's wife, who was having one of her few serious moments in the series. Suzy. Yasuke sighed as he heard the words of his wife, the woman he had cheated by a young Japanese, cute woman. Then Broly, surprised and hiding his smile of satisfaction, said superficially, you may be right, maybe I'm not as bastard as I think, and maybe I think too much about things. Wise words, Miss Joestar, that will make me feel less guilty in the future, after all I need a team like them, among other things. Future, what are you going to do in the future? Asked Joseph, who did not miss that intriguing detail. Nothing, don't listen to me, Jeej, said Broly, moving his 3 eyes from one side to the other trying to hide his intentions. Are you really going to go without more? Asked Jotaro, accompanied by Kaioshin, who were tired of seeing how Polnareff flooded the floor of his garden and had come to talk to his therapist. You have defeated our greatest enemy and that of humanity, and you have given us back our lives. We would all be very happy that you stayed for the celebration, especially Polnareff, although now it seems that he has fallen asleep because of the emotional shock, Kaioshin said in a very friendly way with his best friend. Thanks for the offer. But for now I'm leaving. But one day I will surely come to say hello. Don't worry, the fact that I'm leaving is not the end of the world. Stardust Crusaders, said Broly before disappearing. Formless realm. This universe has been incredibly easy to overcome. But it was to be expected. I am too OP, although the maid in heaven could be a problem, said Broly upon appear in his particular dimension. In the middle of the particular dimension of Broly and a agonizing Kars and Dio floated in a state of stop time, a great irony being Dio, possibly the best known or at least recognized fictional character for stopping time. Where is your ZA Warudo now, Dio? Ha 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 ha. Seriously, try to stop my time with the amount of space-time skills I have. Broly said, lightly hitting Dio's head again and again without hurting him, although if he were conscious he would surely feel deeply humiliated. It's a joke, I don't despise you so much, deep down I feel somewhat identified with you and with Kars. Some will call you simple characters due to the fact that your goal is to become the most powerful being possible and dominate the world. But I understand you, well, I don't see that world domination is something funny or necessary, but everyone has their hobbies. Whatever. It's been more than 2 decades since the bastard Abalon ripped off my precious powers from the JoJo universe. Therefore it is poetic justice that my first world and acquisition is precisely from this universe. Because of him I lost biologically immortal and perfect body of the good Kars, although now mine is much better, but it is the intention what is important, and of course also several stands, among them that of the evolved version of Dio's stand. The perfect living being Kars itself is an interesting specimen which contains the genome of every living being that exists and that is able to control and transform each of its cells autonomously to replicate and control those life forms, an incredible power among many of what he has and something that I will love to study, but the really important thing about him for me is his incredible intelligence and his exceedingly impressive knowledge about biology, knowledge of which I will get much benefit he. I also need scientists in my immortal legion, not only can I have warriors, Broly said to himself, imagining the possibilities that could bring the greatest genius of the history of this planet Earth. The creator of the stone masks that turns humans into vampires and the other stone masks capable of evoking the race of the Earths and finally making them a perfect biological life form with an IQ of 480. What will happen when he acquires all his knowledge? And what will happen when he makes him work for me with samples of the Dragon Ball universe? And other universes? And as for you, Dio, the ability of your stand will help me improve my ability to stop time to a certain extent, and it was also one of the stands that I wanted at first because of its development potential, but As with Kars, what I love most is in your little head. This great evil genius somehow in a very convenient way discovered in his few years in which he had a stand how to develop it until its final phase. A final phase where the stand obtains an almost divine power capable of manipulating the universe, reality, or fate itself, or as Dio said, obtain the heaven. Knowledge that Dio passed to Enrico Pucci in what is known as Dio's Diary, where he explains the process by which Pucci evolved his white snake, a stand that manipulated the mind and souls in Made in Heaven, the stand that can to accelerate the time of the universe until restarted at the taste of the stand holder, the most powerful canon stand of all, although there are theories that Gold Experience Requiem could have survived the power of Pucci. And also as it was seen in the video game JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Eyes of Heaven, where an alternative Dio that was found by Funny Valentine in one of his infinite dimensions, a Dio that was not defeated by Jotaro or by me in Egypt. Dio used that knowledge for himself and evolved the world in the world over heaven, the most cheated stand that exists, with which he can overwrite reality with punches. A Dio that would have managed to conquer all the dimensions of the JoJo-verse if it were not for the convenience that Star Platinum, Jotaro's stand and the world, Dio's stand is the same, with what it became Star Platinum over heaven and defeated him. And although I have already read the process of evolution of the stand in the novel, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Over Heaven, I have listened to the conversation between Dio and Pucci, I have read Dio's diary and with my answer talker, that with some limitation allows me to know the answer to any question. It wouldn't be very difficult for me to replicate that process, but I prefer to have the origin of that knowledge in my hands if I can. Also, if my Dio reaches that final phase plus the other benefits that he can obtain in my custody, he will also be a magnificent soldier among my ranks. Ha 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 ha, Broly said, speaking to himself in a very long monologue once again. He liked to hear his voice when he revealed his plan, especially when he had been waiting a decade to carry it out. Anyway, let's continue. Assimilation. Having said that, Formless Realm began the assimilation process with Kars and Dio, to get all their information and turn them into 100% loyal subordinates. And while the assimilation process was taking place, supervised by other Brolys according to the distribution of the work that he imposed on himself and his bodies. He traveled to the Desire Realm, where he materialized in his hand with his materialization magic an arrow stand user creator. Stands. The day of my death I almost get some very powerful and useful stands. It wouldn't be bad to get them, although for that I must fuse them into one, since you can only have one stand per person, but I always wondered what my own stand would be like. Broly said, looking curiously at the arrow stand user creator. I cannot exactly know the power of my stand, if it will be strong or weak, so acquiring a stand of a specific character would be less risky, but I don't want to depend on another stand, I want my own. In theory, if I'm pierced by this arrow, I will get a stand or I will die, and since I cannot die there is only one option, ha 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 ha. I hope it is a powerful and majestic stand. I wish it had the appearance of Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann as I read in a Kadan novel. Beyond Reality, Atomsk Ascension Over Heavens. If I think that's the name of that novel, take that, good product placement. Anyway, here I go, said Broly, weakening his body so that he could stick the arrow in his chest. Due to the powerful constitution of his body and immortality, he didn't feel any pain or impact on his body, unlike Koichi who almost died. What he did notice is a new kind of power, which he allowed to enter without restrictions in his body in concept, making his new stand be shared in real time by all his bodies scattered in different places and existential planes. A new stand was born. And that user stand named Broly, who was surrounded by a green aura of stand, was preparing to discover everything about his new power. Oh wow, this is really unexpected, and maybe fortunate. My stand is one of the strangest stand types that exist, a bound stand, said Broly with a thoughtful face, observing his monkey tail, which moved excessively and could lengthen and expand at will. My tail has become a stand. A bound stand is a type of stand that is linked to an object or material thing. As a result, ordinary humans are more likely to see them in effect, as the object they are bound to will showcase supernatural properties. Moreover, as is the rule of thumb, the greater the object of the stand is linked to, the more powerful the stand is, and unlike the humanoid stands, some users can modify the shape of the bound object, and also the user doesn't receive direct damage if the stand is hurt. Like for example Love Deluxe, the stand bound to the hair of Yukako Yamagishi, with which she could have perfect control of her fortified hair by the stand and use it in very strange ways. And in that aspect, the stand of Broly was very similar to the one of Yukako, although with some differences. While he was still trying out his new skill in the vacuum of the Desire Realm, his tail/stand was extended very fast until it came to measure more than 999,999 kilometers, more than twice the size of the circumference of Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system, and then widened more than 90,000 kilometers, more than twice the circumference of the Earth. And in that way he continued to modify the size, making it longer and shorter, wider and narrower, and moving it at ultraluminous speeds in the vacuum, so fast that if there had been planets around it they would have been taken out of their orbit due to the colossal size and speed of Broly's tail, not to mention what would have happened if he had hit them directly. And he kept practicing until he could get used to her perfectly. Wow, with this I have managed to make the biggest weak point of a scion become my strongest point. Ha 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 ha. Wonderful. Initially, I wanted my TTGL humanoid stand, but this is so much better for me. This stand that has already strengthened my tail, is linked to my own body and therefore becomes stronger, faster, sturdy and with greater reach as I increase my power and energy, which is perfect for someone so strong like me. However, a humanoid stand such as the World or Star Platinum, so it has been seen throughout JoJo, their stats of power, speed, endurance, range and precision have no relation to the strength of its owner. Even though Dio had a vampiric body far superior to Jotaro's, his stands were even, he even lost in direct confrontation on many occasions, not to mention that they share damage. Despite the advantage that they are invisible to other people, everything else is a disadvantage for me. I could have ended up with a stand weaker than me, and that in case it was attacked the damage would pass to me, damage that my body could have endured perfectly, as is the case with Dio with his shinbone of death. Ha 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 ha, it seems that my stand has fulfilled my expectations and needs of which I myself wasn't entirely aware I needed. Mwah. Broly said, kissing and hugging his own extended and enlarged tail, of which he had a special affection before, but now he had no words to express his pride. And as for the special ability of my stand, it seems simple, but it has many possibilities, he said, materializing a lighter next to his tail and igniting it, making the fire touch directly the surface of his tail. And then, the ability of his stand was activated. The tail began to release an immense heat and red light all over its surface, as if it were fire. It was as if Broly's tail had acquired the properties of fire. Jejejej, certainly a stand is the manifestation of an individual's innate, fighting spirit, yearnings, distinctive features, personality, mind and soul. It looks a lot like the Nen in this aspect, precisely because Yoshihiro Togashi relied on the JoJo stands to create its concept. I would say that my tail/stand are reflecting my true suppressed Nen nature, which I changed to specialization when I made my purchase when I reincarnated. As I suspected. I really am a transmuters, which was something to expect due to my personality. Although I don't like to admit it, but it is not that I dislike that too much, he said Broly, scratching his head a bit self-conscious. Transmutation users have unique attitudes, and many are regarded as weirdos or tricksters. Often they put forth a facade while hiding the truer aspects of their personalities. Even when they don't hide their personalities, they rarely reveal their true intentions. Many transmuters rely on techniques that give unique and unpredictable properties to their Nen that reflects their personalities. Well, I've already set up my embassy in JoJo World for possible future operations, I've got 2 new henchmen, and maybe I'll relive and pick up a few more. And above all, I have a very handsome stand and with many possibilities which I have to train and discover for now. I have to develop it as much as possible by normal means before turning it into a heaven or requiem stand, or maybe a heaven requiem. Hojojojojo, I'm dying to see it, but for now calm down. My stand, Strauss, still needs a time of adaptation. And you could say that I already have put my eyes where and with whom I am going to test its wonders, said Broly, exercising her flaming tail once more. Stand name, Strauss. User, Broly the fucking master. Type, bowed stand. Appearance. Strauss is bound to the tail of its user Broly. Is his fucking reinforced Oozuru tail. Ability. Tail manipulation. Strauss is bound to the tail of its user Broly, allowing it to grow to various lengths and move with considerable strength and dexterity. Can increase or decrease its size in any of its 3 dimensions, even irregularly. Super strength. The strength of Strauss is as strong as the total power of Broly's body at the time of using the stand, increasing its power depending on the size adopted. Super speed. Strauss moves at a speed similar to what Broly can achieve, regardless of the range and size that Strauss has acquired. Super durability. Strauss has a maximum defensive capacity of the whole body of Broly, which increases with increasing size. Super range. Strauss can increase its size depending on the Broly power units. 1 unit of power equals 10 meters of 3-dimensional extension. Copy of properties. By having contact with a material substance, Strauss can copy the properties of that substance and replicate them in his tale. Strauss can choose from each copied substance what properties he wants to manifest, as well as in what intensity they will manifest, but increasing the power of that property requires more energy. It can only replicate one substance at a time, but can choose different properties of that substance. The more powerful the source sample, the more powerful the capabilities will be. Similar to the Magica Arabia of Najima. Stats. Destructive power, S. Speed, S. Durability, S. Precision, A. Range, S. Developmental potential, A. Reflection of the author. I have called Broly stand Strauss for several reasons. It is the last name of the composer Richard Strauss, the composer of the legendary musical piece, also Sprach Zarathustra, a song from the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, which is heard in a mythical scene that surely you all know, in which monkeys appear. Oozuru equals monkey. https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=zmx7k8noiku. This song, also based on a book by Nietzsche, in which he talks about the evolution and transcendence of the human being, from beast to man and from man to Superman, the goal of Broly. From Diamond is unbreakable in JoJo, they use musical elements for the name and skills of the stands, and this song seemed to make sense for this stand. According to the Urban Dictionary, Strauss means 1. Totally awesome example, dude that guy is Strauss. 2. The last name of the family that can totally pwn yours in anything. Yes, anything. Oppose them and you will be severely slapped. Example, Mario Straussed Sonic at Super Smash Bros. Continuously, obviously. My real name is Ricardo, Richard in Spanish, just like the composers. As for his power, I wanted to make reference to the true nature of Broly Nen if he hadn't chosen to be a specialist, and since monkeys have a reputation for copying things, I have chosen to copy properties, like a good transmuter. Unexpected ultra-final phase of the Fourth Ninja War. Madara Six Paths had launched the infinite Tsukiyomi over the whole world, flooding it with an intense and strange light capable of penetrating even the most hermetic structures of solitude, without leaving the slightest trace of shadow. Every living being affected by that light, whether human or animal, except for plants and even simpler organisms, his eyes changed, showing the Rinnegan shape of Madara, which doesn't make much sense, since this genjutsu was released with the Rinne Sharingan. It should be the Rinne Sharingan. That was the sign that they had fallen prey of the ultimate genjutsu, a genjutsu that left them completely motionless as if they were statues. Statues that could only see helplessly how several giant roots rose from the ground, introducing them into cocoons. The only ones who were saved apart from the perpetrators of the jutsu were Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, who were protected by Sasuke's Susanoo, and all the Edo Tensei who had fought at that time, not counting Yamato, who was inside a Zetsu, and possibly some blind man. Madara's plan had been a success, and with this he believed that he had become the savior of the planet, ending forever all conflicts and wars, until Black Zetsu, that up to now Madara always thought that he was his creator, betrayed him in an unexpected and cruel way by activating a jutsu that would transform Madara in a very grotesque way into Kaguya, the ancient rabbit demon goddess, the mother of the six-path sage and the origin of the chakra in the whole world. Kaguya, the final boss of Naruto, that observed with love and hate Naruto's and Sasuke chakra and realized that they had in their possession the same sealing technique that her two children Hagamoro and Himura used to seal in the moon. To avoid possible destruction on the planet, Kaguya teleported the 4+ Obito, still possessed to the moment by Black Zetsu, to one of her dimensions, from where she showed how superior she was to Naruto and Sasuke, despite how powerful and cheated they were at that moment. Until at some point Kaguya, using one of her space-time skills, appeared behind our hero and his victimized emo friend, grabbing and immobilizing them with the help of Black Zetsu, which took advantage of that moment in which Naruto and Sasuke were immobilized, and Kaguya cried tenderly, remembering their two children. To explain how for centuries he had been manipulating the whole history of the world in secret with the sole purpose of resurrecting his mother Kaguya so that she would return to dominate the entire world as before the existence of the ninjas. And once Black Zetsu finished his speech, in which he magnified himself and his mother, Kaguya awoke from her disillusion. I hate you, Hagoromo. Himura, you both belong to me, Kaguya said, activating her Byakugan with hate while the tears of her eyes kept falling down her cheeks. My role is finished. Now, I shall return to the almighty mother goodness, said Black Zetsu, which was still immobilizing Naruto and Sasuke. At that moment, Naruto said in a cliché way as he freed himself from Zetsu's grip. Of all things, you people, of all things. are not the history of shinobis. And while he was releasing also the immobilization of Sasuke, he added, and one more thing. A mother is happy when her children gain their independence and leave. Your rebellious phase has lasted quite a while. Mother is the creator of chakra. No matter what you kids try to do, it's all useless, said Zetsu Black, hiding in the sleeves of Kagaya. We need to create an opening to use the sealing jutsu. Naruto. Sasuke said with cold sweat on his forehead. Yeah. We've got no other choice now. We've got to use that jutsu. Naruto replied to Sasuke with cold sweat on his forehead as well. One of Naruto's clones was chatting with the hidden Sakura and Kakashi about how tricky the situation was, while he healed Obito with one of his broken new powers granted by the Rikudo Sennin. Meanwhile, the real Naruto was in front of Kagura and her amorphous son, who was hiding under his clothes. Yes. I know it sounds weird, and together with Sasuke decided their plan against that wise and powerful enemy. Wait. Are you serious? Said Sasuke, who wasn't very convinced with Naruto's plan. We won't know until we try, will we? Naruto said confidently, and Sakuo looked at him suspiciously. I've been secretly practicing this technique over the Rasengan. I think this might give us our best shot. Naruto said without any hesitation. He had great confidence in his plan. After a few moments of consideration, Sasuke answered, since he couldn't think of anything better either, if that might have some possibility of creating an opening with her. Fine. I'll get my left eye ready then. Let's do it. He shouted as he accumulated chakra in his Rinnegan. Right. Naruto shouted, making the characteristic seal of the Kage Bushin no Jutsu. They were about to put into practice their great, brilliant, spectacular, and plan. The plan with which the destiny of the planet would be decided in this incredible battle of the gods, where there were techniques so powerful that they were capable of destroying everything in kilometers. The plan that could change the destiny of the planet in this incredible battle of the gods, a battle with jutsus so overpowered that were capable of destroying everything in kilometers and change dimensions. At that moment, Kagaya changed her expression when she realized that Naruto and Sasuke began their attack. Sasuke threw his Amaterasu directly on her body, wrapping she completely. However, Kagaya was somehow able to quickly extinguish the black flames of the Amaterasu, but when she did, Naruto was already right in front of her, ready to perform his Kage Bussing. She moved. Sakura shouted, acting as a real-time narrator while Sasuke watched from afar with his left eye. Eat this. Naruto shouted, about to perform his final technique, the one he had practiced the most. Naruto created almost a dozen clones, which practically surrounded Kagaya for all intentions. He was about to perform another jutsu, so Kagaya with great seriousness and warlike attitude activated her Byakugan to see through his attack and chakra from any direction. In this way she won't miss any detail, no matter how small it was. Everything was filled with smoke due to Naruto's jutsu, and when that smoke dissipated, and sexy reverse harem no jutsu. Each of Naruto's clones had become a naked hot guy, of different styles and tastes, who approached Kagaya in a suggestive, seductive, and erotic way. Before this jutsu, Kagaya was completely stunned, so much that she instantly deactivated her Byakugan unconsciously. Her mouth was open and she didn't move even a single millimeter while she watched, dumbfounded and confused, what was before her. We didn't know very well if that expression was due to the unexpected surprise of finding a jutsu so bizarre and unique. We didn't know very well if that expression and drowsiness was because she was excited to see so much attractive man naked around her, like Sakura, who was even bleeding from her nose. Nor did we know very well if it was due to a complete rejection or disapproval for that jutsu, like Kakashi. There's been this trend forming that the stronger someone is, the more these sexy techniques seem to work, Naruto thought after performing his most deadly jutsu. Have you gone completely stupid? What the hell kind of a technique are you using at a time like this? I mean, I'm different story, but do you really think that jutsu is going to work? Oh, a god like that. Sakura thought, incredibly upset, angry, and excited as she bled through her nose like an old pervert. But whatever the case, Kagaya had been totally annulled both physically and psychically. And in that moment, when Naruto was about to undo his transformation and give a futile punch to Kagaya in her face, palm, a huge hand appeared a few millimeters behind Kagaya's head and at a great speed gave him a punch that covered his entire head, making it disappear. And instantly, Kagaya's whole body also disappeared quickly, leaving only the black Zetsu behind, who, like all those present, were stunned before that other unexpected turn of events. Eehee! What is happening? Everyone shouted at the same time, including Black Zetsu, who had fallen into a panic upon seeing how his mother had completely disappeared. Everyone was watching with panic that hand that was flying in the air, a hand from which the rest of the body began to appear, as if it were crossing an invisible portal. He was a strange person who looked to be 25 years old. He was extremely tall and muscular, his long hair was reddish like the long monkey tail on his back. Everything in that man transmitted danger and power. However, what most alerted and impacted everyone was his face, or rather what was on his face, because just as Kagaya, he also had 3 eyes, 3 unknown eyes that shone with different colors. One green, another blue and another red. Eyes, or rather, 3 strange and mysterious eyes never seen before and in the world of Naruto. And in the mind of every ninja, unusual eyes could only mean one thing. Dojutsu, ninja abilities that utilize the eyes, to byproduct of specific Kekkei Genkai, and as everyone in this dimension created by Kagaya knew, all the dojutsu in this world had origin in the extraterrestrial clan Otsutsuki, specifically from Kagaya Otsutsuki. Therefore the appearance of a strange person like Kagaya, with 3 eyes with strange colors like Kagaya, floating in the air like Kagaya, in the dimension of Kagaya, that used space/time techniques like those of Kagaya and easily defeated Kagaya, made everyone think exactly the same thing. That man was a member of the clan Otsutsuki. No please. Another extraterrestrial god with strange eyes, no. First Obito, then Madara, then Kagaya and now another one, thought Kakashi, Sakura and Naruto that were about to shed tears while Sasuke cursed his own existence. However, the most shocked and terrified was the Black Zetsu. No, it cannot be, he must be from the clan. I cannot believe that. They came here at such an inconvenient time and discovered the betrayal of Mother. What has he done with Mother? Damn. However, Broly, because it is clear that he was Broly, didn't care about the seriousness of the situation. Ha, great job Naruto, it has been a very fun, efficient and effective attack, it would have been a shame not to use it correctly. This is like writing a novel. No matter how good, interesting, cool or innovative a premise may be, if you don't know how to develop it and execute it correctly, you won't write a good novel. This just will be a good premise, and a premise by itself has no value. It is not that he needed it expressly. But Kagaya with her space-time skills could have been very elusive, and I also thought that is a pity not to take advantage of your efforts, he said, cheering and laughing at the same time in a sincere way. The group of ninjas no longer knew what to think or react to so many unexpected and unnecessary surprises that day. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.